My name is Alessio Fasano. I'm the Director of Center for Celiac Research at the Massachusetts General Hospital for Children in Boston. Yes, we just 2 weeks ago we published a paper in New England Journal of Medicine on a large cohort of infants at risk for celiac disease that were followed for 10 years. Well, celiac disease is an autoimmune disease, so it's like having diabetes or multiple sclerosis, but very, very peculiar because there are features in celiac disease that are unique. Like any other autoimmune disease, it's a recipe with 2 ingredients, genes, many, that you have to be predisposed, and then an environmental trigger that is mismanaged by the immune system because of this genetic predisposition. The immune system is there to defend us. In people, they are genetically skewed for autoimmunity. The immune system, rather than to get rid of these enemies, start to attack your own body. What is peculiar about celiac disease is the enemy is known. It's called gluten. It's a protein in many grains, including wheat, barley, and rye. That is the one that set the immune system to start this attack against its own body. The target being the intestine with the outcome, the clinical outcome that characterizes celiac disease. Well, because the culprit is known, gluten, there are a lot of theories on why some people develop celiac disease and why some people they do not. The genes that make you at risk for celiac disease, there are the HLA genes, and specifically 2 isoforms of those HLA DQ2, DQ8 are extremely frequent in the general population, 30-35%. But only 1% of the population would develop celiac disease. So the question was, why? What makes these people so unique to develop the problem? And the second question was, in the past, we were under the impression that, if you eat gluten and you have these genes, it's destiny that you develop celiac disease. And the autoimmune insult will start when gluten comes into the picture, i.e. when you introduce gluten in the diet, so the first year of life. If you develop celiac disease right away as a child, or you develop as an adult, that is something that epidemiologically speaking we learned that can happen. We thought that was due to how aggressive was the immune system. A very aggressive immune system will put you over the edge right away. You develop symptoms as a child. A low-paced immune system would take longer, and you would develop as an adult. And then several studies, including some done at our center here at MGH, reveal actually there were people that can eat gluten for many, many years and not having problem with that, and all of a sudden they lose the luxury to tolerate it. So the emphasis to do this study was to quote-unquote rewrite the natural history of celiac disease. So we enrolled 700 kids at birth at risk for celiac disease because they were, first-degree relatives of somebody with celiac disease, and we followed them for a long time, for 10 years. And we asked ourselves several questions. First question was, if we delay the introduction of gluten, rather than given, at 4 or 5 months when baby food is introduced, we delay 12 months. Can we give time to the immune system to mature and they're able to tolerate gluten and so prevent the celiac disease? And this was based on some retrospective studies suggesting that the time of introduction can be an important factor. And then we asked many other questions, such as, it is true that if you introduce gluten while breastfeeding, you allow the immune system to be more tolerogenic about gluten because the breast milk has substances that make gluten less reactogenic. And then were, other questions like, if you are exposed to infections in the first year of life, is the chance to develop celiac disease higher as was, in the past, hypothesized? So all this hypotheses were based on retrospective studies, and those are good studies that can give you indications, but only if you follow the same kid over a long period of time, you can really make a statement how important these features. So this study that was again published 2 weeks ago, it just revolutionized the entire field of celiac disease pathogenesis and probably autoimmune pathogenesis in general. So lesson number 1, if you introduce gluten late, you do not prevent celiac disease. You merely delay the onset. But these kids will eventually get to the very final destination the same way than the ones that introduce gluten at the current recommended, introduction time from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Lesson number 2, very shocking lesson. Breastfeeding does not protect. Contrary to what we believed, among the many advantages of breastfeeding, we cannot list the capability to prevent celiac disease by introducing gluten while breastfeeding. Breastfeeding made no difference whatsoever. What was a third finding that is quite remarkable is that genetics makes a huge difference. So if you are an individual in the general population, your risk is 1%. If you are a first-degree relative of an individual with celiac disease, your risk goes 10 times higher, so it's 10%. If you do have 2 copies of one of these HLA genes, the HLA-DQ2, because as any genes, you can get, one copy from one parent and the other copy from the other parent, in other words, you're homozygous, your risk goes up to 40%, 40 times more. So genetics is the driving force to increase exponentially the risk to develop celiac disease in kids in which somebody in the same family has celiac disease.